the leader, in quotes, might be scarce, right? There's maybe only one CEO in an organization. Leadership, the act, is abundant. That there's so much leadership to go around and so many leadership moments to be seized that if we can stop thinking about leadership as a title and instead leadership as an act, it opens up this inclusive invitation for all of us to then become leaders, to all work together. And if we don't care who gets credit, it's amazing what we can make happen.
Welcome to Living Once Twice, a lifestyle design and personal adventure podcast. My name is Justin. Come with me as I'm here to help you chart your course for creating the fulfilling life you desire. Join me as every Wednesday we'll dive into the inspiring guest stories, remarkable science, and useful strategies to help you create the momentum you need to take action towards designing your dream life. Remember, your dream life is waiting for you. It's time to go for it. You deserve it. Greetings all and welcome to Living Once Twice, the place where we rewrite narratives, reinvent ourselves, and reimagine the possibilities for our lives. I want to thank you for tuning into today's episode. I'm very excited to bring on today's guest, Alex Budak. Alex is a social entrepreneur, faculty member at Berkeley Haas, and author of Becoming a Changemaker. At UC Berkeley, he created and teaches a transformative course, Becoming a Changemaker, and serves as executive director of Berkeley Haas Global Access Program and a faculty director for the Berkeley Executive Education programs. As a social entrepreneur, he also co-founded StartSomeGood.com, ran Sweden's most prominent social innovation incubator, Reach for Change, and was previously at Change.org. A graduate of UCLA and Georgetown University, he teaches, speaks, consults, and advises organizations around the world with the mission of helping people from all walks of life become changemakers. His brand new book, Becoming a Changemaker, was just released a couple of weeks ago, so congratulations on that. And he loves travel adventures, rooting for the underdog, and spending time with his two favorite changemakers, his wife Rebecca and their toddler son. Alex, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Justin, I'm so happy to be with you. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you and I appreciate this opportunity. Alex, before we dive into your story, I want to give the listeners just some context as I got to meet you through our work in higher education. And that was a couple years ago. And so when we got to chatting about your book coming out and the opportunity to speak with you, for me, this is very exciting because before we hit record, just hitting on some of the nuances that you talk about the identity of being a change maker, helping also debunk this myth that you need to have a title or you need to have all these resources to do it, that people can really lead from where they are. I think this conversation is going to really activate so many people's spirit. And so once again, I just thank you for the time and this opportunity to really unpack some of these great insights that you bring to life in the book.
Can't wait. We're going to have a great discussion here.
So yeah, we're going to discuss a lot. We're going to talk about the changemaker mindset, strategies for challenging the status quo, and also the strength in collaboration. But where I want to go, I want to start and backtrack a little bit to learn more about your journey, Alex. And also, can you share more too about how the idea for this book manifested itself?
Well, I mean, like so many things in life, there's some moments that are just those kind of magical moments where good luck happens. So for me, this started in a kind of serendipitous meeting that I had with a guy named Jay Stowski. He's the one that oversees all the curriculum and faculty at Berkeley Haas. And so I went to him for some career advice, kind of standard career advice. But I think he could tell that my heart wasn't quite in it. And so I distinctly remember he said, Alex, what do you really want to do? And I said, well, what I really want to do is teach. And then I think I started making some excuses for why I couldn't teach. I wasn't old enough, didn't have a PhD, blah, blah, blah. And he interrupted me and said, Alex, what do you want to teach? And in that moment, it just became super clear. I said, I want to teach Becoming a Changemaker. And he said, all right, show me a syllabus, show it to me, and then we'll go from there. And I leapt out of my seat. I was just elated that someone saw this potential. And I walked out of his office, closed the door, immediately Googled how to create a syllabus, because I had no idea how to actually create a syllabus. But then that started the journey of teaching at Berkeley Haas. So Becoming a Changemaker has been just such a privilege to teach this class. And I found that it's been quite transformational for students. And in teaching the class, I've always thought, well, I firmly believe that change makers come from all walks of life. And so how might we take some of the magic of this class at UC Berkeley and make it accessible to anyone, anywhere? And that's really the motivation to turn the class into this book that just hit the newsstands.
Wow. This is great. Just kind of hearing more about context about it. And you do go over so much of that in the book. But there's something I want to talk about in that moment, because there was kind of that opportunity of being asked the question. And so often, Alex, many of us never sit with and ask ourselves the question of like what we really want. And so I think that was just really inspiring to hear you say, like, you sat with that question, you authentically answered it in an honest way. And my goodness, where that has taken you into creating this book is just amazing, creating the course and everything else. So I hope that's something that sits with folks too, of like, take the time, ask yourself the why and what do you really want? Because in our society, as you know, we could be programmed to think we want something else, but that's not really what's in our spirit. So I appreciate you once again giving us context of the story behind the book here.
Absolutely. And I'll add on the flip side that if we are ever in the position to ask someone else that question or to help open up doors for others, seize those opportunities as well. So it goes both ways.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Rightfully so. And because especially those who are going to be inspired and being in that change maker position, this is an opportunity that they would have to do that. So like I said, we're going to talk more and dive deeper into the book, but I wanted to learn more about just that journey of becoming a writer. I'm sure it's a labor of love, but like, what was that whole process and experience like for you? Were there any moments of self-doubt? I mean, you're talking about being a change maker and things that people can do in the world, but for yourself, were there any moments that really challenged you mentally of like, can I really write this book? Can I really do this? Am I the one to be writing this on this topic? Like, did you have any moments like that as you went through your journey and your process?
Constant and continually. Yeah, all the time. I had those moments and in many different forms and many different times. So first there was just the idea of the daunting journey ahead where you're like, okay, I've got this idea, I've got this vision, and I have to somehow write 80, 90,000 words about something. And you're looking at a blank piece of paper, or more appropriately, a blank Google Doc, and going, okay, how do I get started with it? That feels really overwhelming. And then I think one of the constant battles I had to fight with myself, a bit of a feeling of imposter syndrome. You know, when you think about like all the authors whom I admire and thinking like, do I deserve to be among them? Like, do I deserve to really write a book? Also had to constantly challenge myself. Like, I just honestly am not great at grammar. I'm just not. Sorry to my English teachers growing up, but I'm quite good at like putting ideas out on paper and like but not great at grammar. And so if you read the book and you think it's well written, so much credit to my amazing editor, Nana Tomasi. She's incredible. And it was a good partnership. But I remember we were using Google Docs and I made the mistake of leaving notifications on. And so sometimes I would come to my computer and get a notification that said something like, Nana has left 822 comments for you, or 822 suggested edits. And like, wow, okay, there's a lot of work to be done. But then you kind of get into the grind of it as you go and sort of like break it down. So it's not just 90,000 words, it's 14 chapters. And then within each chapter, it's kind of stories. And then piece by piece, you build it. And that's how it came about.
Wow. Okay. So I appreciate you starting to kind of walk us through, Alex, just the different things that were going on in your mind. And also, I guess, the strategies and the tools of like, okay, yes, it seems like an elephant, but the best way to eat an elephant is piece by piece, breaking things down in smaller chunks. Is there anything else you'd like to offer folks? Because I think for many people, this is a bucket list item. We got stories, perspectives to share, but we got a full-time job. In your bio, we talked, you got a family, you got a little one. So there's a lot of different other things spinning in the world. Anything you would offer to people who similarly don't think it's possible for them to become a writer because of these other responsibilities, or because they're concerned that it can be such an overwhelming task?
Yeah, there's always opportunity for you to do it. You have to find what works for you, and don't let anyone tell you this is the way you have to do it. I don't care if you like to write with pen and pencil, if you like to dictate with Siri, or if you want to write on it, whatever it is, like there's ways to do it. One of the things that I found is I needed to find my routine and my rhythm. So I did a lot of testing. So I'd say, okay, does it work for me to write for 4 hours late at night? Nope, definitely not, especially with a toddler. That does not work. Does it work for me to work really early in the morning? Nope, that doesn't really work either. Does it work for me to do big, long stretches of time? Nope, I tend to get burned out. So what I found is 2 hours was my sweet spot. And from right around like 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., that was like my sweet spot to be doing writing. And so I wouldn't force myself to do 6-hour marathon writing sessions because I know that wouldn't work for me. But I just try to be really consistent. Just go, okay, I'm going to write for 2 hours. Doesn't matter if I get 300 words or 3,000 words. I'm just going to keep going, be consistent. And once I found that rhythm, I started to get a little bit of momentum behind it.
That is awesome. See, folks, just go out there, figure out your strategy and tweak it as you go along, and then you'll find what works for you and you can be able to bring it to life. And just one more question before we transition on. How long of a process was it like from start to finish? Was it something you were able to do in like a year, 9 months? Like how long of a process, just to give folks context of that?
So it was about 2.5 years total.
Okay.
And I would say the actual writing was about 15 months or so, something like that, a little over a year. And then the publication process also takes about a year as well. So from the time of turning in the final manuscript to doing all the marketing and the cover design and all that, that takes about a year.
Wow. Okay. So then let's dive into this project, this passion project that you have finally brought to life in the world. And we were hitting on different aspects of mindset. And I appreciate how in the book you address Carol Dweck's work, which I love, growth mindset, fixed mindset. And I want to start with that whole notion, Alex, and you hit on this. Many of us don't identify as change makers. When we hear that word, we think we've got to have a title, we've got to have a certain amount of degrees, power, influence in our background. So what would you like to share with folks out there who maybe don't think that they identify themselves as a change maker, to help them shift their own self-image and to see that this is applicable to all of us across the board? We all can be and lead and adapt and be change makers out here in the world.
Absolutely. Well, I think I'll start by saying that the world has never been more ready for you. It's never been calling out more for people to step up and lead positive change from wherever they are, whether that's a lawyer, a doctor, a higher ed professional, a student. It doesn't matter where you are. We need everyone together to lead positive change. Now, when I think about the change I want to see in the world, it comes from a place of humility, which is that I can't possibly know exactly what the world needs, but I am positive that the world needs more change makers. And so this radically inclusive notion of change making is the beating heart of my class and the beating heart of the book that I wrote. I want everyone everywhere to see themselves as a change maker. You know, we so often have these identities which are exclusive when it comes to careers. We think, well, either I'm an artist or I'm not, or I'm a technologist or I'm not, I'm a leader or I'm not. And I want change making to be a radically inclusive identity that all of us can find a bit of ourselves in. Throughout the book, I tell stories of, I think it's over 50 different change makers, and they're famous change makers, but a lot of people who are everyday people. And I want you to see how each of them has led positive change and what we can learn from their stories, from their examples.
And I love the stories that you share. They're so insightful and enriching, and there's so many perspectives that you bring in. Before we started recording, we talked about for some folks, if you come from a marginalized background, you could also think that it's not possible for you to be a change maker because of dynamics, power, and influence. And so I want to talk more about some of these stories because, once again, you offer so many powerful ones, and talk about a quote that you had highlighted from Brian Stevenson about his career in challenging the status quo. As he says that when it comes to challenging the status quo, someone has to stand up when other people are sitting. Someone has to speak when others are quiet. And this is all to the notion that change making, it involves risks out there, and that can be difficult. And for some people, that trade-off of wanting to challenge the status quo can come with a lot of risk to your career and other things. So when we think about change making, especially during these times, challenging the status quo, what would you say to folks who may be a little bit hesitant about the risk that could come with it and are concerned about that, but want to see change happen?
Absolutely. And it's so important to recognize where we're coming from and our own privileges that we have. So in the book, I write about the privilege of failure. And the truth is, as a white man, I have a wider safety net to fail than many other folks do. So I think we can recognize where we're coming from when we think about these things. But again, I'm a big believer that each of us can lead positive change from where we are. And I'm inspired by the work of Brian Stevenson. He's, of course, the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative. And I like the work of Edwin Hollander. So he's a classic psychologist. And he came up with something called idiosyncrasy credits. So idiosyncrasy credits is the idea that again, this is my language, not his. If you're always questioning the status quo on every single thing, you get to be pretty annoying. No one wants to be around you and they'll stop listening to you. So idiosyncrasy credits are a way that explains how and when you can sort of earn the right to question the status quo. Because there's two ways to do so. One is through competence, so by doing a good job. The second is by sometimes going with the flow. So imagine that you're trying to revolutionize an event that your organization is putting on. And there's so many things that could be changed. Well, maybe instead of fighting about, hey, we should have different entrees or a different seating chart, you kind of let those go. So that way, when you do question the status quo on things like making sure that it's inclusive to people joining digitally, or that the panel has equal representation of genders, that's the type of status quo you want to challenge. And so Hollander's work, I think, gives us a framework to think of it as picking our battles, but knowing when to question the status quo. So that way, when we go for it, we can really go big and things we deeply believe in.
I love that. I love that whole breaking it down for folks of, like being strategic and mindful about it and kind of that approach and how that could kind of help to build up. And speaking, Alex, to the building up piece, I like how you two talk about different things that could help kind of spark if we're not sure about what we want to change, be a change maker in, of leaning into our curiosity. Because for many of us, as we go into these adult years, our curiosity can get drained and pulled from us, and we can really lose touch of it. But you say that it's like a muscle. It can be cultivated and it can be strengthened. So for folks out there who are like, well, I want to lead change, I don't know where I want to start. How do they develop that muscle of curiosity and reignite that so that then they can maybe start to think of creative ways to go about change making in the world? Like, how do they get back to shore of that childlike creativity and that curiosity?
Yeah, great question. And that's building off of the work of Ian Leslie, who's done some really good work on curiosity. And how funny is it that, as I look at my toddler, he is so curious about every single thing in the world. Tonight, he was really fascinated by how the water in the bathtub drains out. How do we lose that curiosity as we go along? Well, I think there's so much pressure to specialize, get hyper-focused, to get one core skill. And I think there's a couple of things we can do to retain our curiosity. The first is a framework that comes from the design firm IDEO. And they say they want to hire people who are T-shaped persons, T-shaped. So that means that if you imagine the letter T, you've got the vertical line, which is a deep level of expertise. So if they're hiring a CFO, you better believe that person knows finance, they know accounting, right? That's their deep level of expertise. But then the horizontal line on the T, that's broad-based understanding, broad-based curiosity, knowing a little bit about lots of different things, whether that's pop culture or Cambodian history, like just knowing a little bit about all these different things. And I think that's something that we should aspire to, is being that T-shaped leader. But then you might say, okay, cool, I want to be that T-shaped leader. How do I go about doing so? And I think one of the issues that we face here, especially in the US, which is such a hard driving work culture, is we never have time to actually think and to breathe. I'm a big fan of taking time off, big fan of taking walks by myself, just kind of letting my mind wander. It's hard to do. I recognize that because there's always pressure to be doing more. But I think the more we can get into those practices and without any expectation of like, okay, I've got 12 minutes to go for a walk. In those 12 minutes, I'm going to come up with great ideas. No, it doesn't work that way. You just got to give yourself some of that space. But if you can develop a bit of that spaciousness, that's a nice practice to just let your mind wander a little bit. The final thing comes from the design thinking world. And it's this idea of thinking like a 3-year-old. Choose whatever age you would like to be. But again, connecting back to that sort of childlike wonder, to just ask yourself those things. You're walking along and you're like, hey, how is that leaf falling from the tree? I wonder how that actually works. And then you sort of take some time to explore it. Whatever those curiosity questions are that you have, instead of just stuffing them in your pocket and be like, oh, I'll get to that when I'm retired. No, take some time to actually explore some of those things. Tap into that curiosity.
I appreciate a lot of these different techniques and things folks can try out, see what works for them. And going back to something you mentioned earlier on was individuals can do this, but also if you're in a position of leadership over others, of team leadership, this is things that you could be trying and testing with your team, because you are right. In our work culture, a lot of times we don't build in time for folks to let their minds wander, to think creatively and things of that nature. And so, I mean, anything else you'd like to say out there to like leaders, organizational leaders, about being able to to support their employees in doing this and how they could go about offering space for them to be curious and to be creative.
Yeah, I love the work done by Amy Edmondson from Harvard Business School. And so she's the person that put forward this idea of psychological safety. And it's so important to create feelings of psychological safety among your team. So much so that when Google did its research to say, hey, what makes a team successful at Google? The number one factor was the presence of psychological safety. This idea that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. And when Edmondson talks about how do you actually build psychological safety in a team, the number one thing is to shift challenges to be solved from an execution problem to a learning problem. When we're in execution mode, it's all about, I need to come up with the quote correct answer as fast as I possibly can and then move on to the next thing. So if you're a leader and you've got 5 things you have to solve in a given day, you're just going solve number 1, then number 2, number 3, and so on. Edmondson teaches us that we need to actually build in some space to make them learning problems. If it's always execution, you're just going to get to an answer. We don't know if it's the best answer, but just something that suffices, and then you move on. Learning problems engage our curiosity muscles. They give us a chance to say, well, how might we? What if? What if we try to do this instead? That's where real growth can come from. But it's not easy to do that as a leader. It's not automatic because we probably feel pressure to say, well, I'm the leader, so I need to make sure that I have all the answers. But no, actually, if you can model failability, if you can ask lots of questions instead of saying this is the answer, you can unlock that curiosity among your team. And again, it might sound soft or squishy, but if you don't trust me, trust Google. Google is hard charging, data driven, and they found psychological safety makes a difference in their teams. And so, yeah, shifting from an execution problem to a learning problem can unlock a lot of curiosity among your team.
Alex, this is really great, the science-backed research behind this. And I appreciate, too, how this is like culture-shifting elements and pillars that you have in the book. And even that reframing of how might we be able to, or what if, opens up and unlocks so much because a lot of times, yes, we just get into that lockdown fixed mindset mode of, all right, there's a fire, we've got to just extinguish it and move on to the next versus tapping into some of these questions that allow us to create some creative solutions or once again, explore our creativity and curiosity even more. So with respect to talking about teams, one of the things that you emphasize is that change making is a team sport. And I love this. I really do enjoy this. So as you say, your most important change making work, you will do your most important change making work through and with others. I'd love to hear you elaborate more about this. And then once again, how we could all look at collaboration with others in terms of enhancing our impact as change makers.
Yeah, thanks. And this kind of leads to why I'm teaching a class on change making versus something else. So as you mentioned in my bio, I'm a social entrepreneur. So before joining UC Berkeley, I co-founded a social enterprise and identify as a social entrepreneur. But not everyone can nor should be a social entrepreneur. Not all of us have the same risk tolerance, the same access to capital, among other things. But unfortunately, there's this bad habit, I think especially in Silicon Valley, where we tend to put the entrepreneur on a pedestal. Sometimes it's called hero-preneurship, this idea of the myth of the lone founder that makes all this change happen. And that's not really how it works. And so a big part of my shift from being a social entrepreneur to being a change maker is, again, thinking about all of us leading change in our own way and collaborating together. That when you think about any of the big, meaningful challenges that are out there to be solved, whether that's climate justice, racial justice, water access, none of these can possibly be solved by any one person or honestly any one single approach. So it's about not just what can I do myself, but how can I tap into the collective and contribute in a meaningful way? I love the paper that was in Stanford's Social Innovation Review. It's called The Most Impactful Leaders You've Never Heard of. And it's all about how you can become what they call a network-based leader. So it takes some humility because it's not just saying, hey, I'm going to do all this stuff, but rather it's saying, I am so committed to this mission, so committed to this challenge that I'm going to contribute in meaningful ways. I'm going to understand what other people are doing and then contribute to it in meaningful ways. Now, that's also a play off of the way I think about leadership. So in my class, in the book, I talk about how we have an opportunity, I think an obligation to reinvent leadership. That's so much of the leadership that we're usually taught in business schools just doesn't work anymore. And so often the way we think about leadership is about like, what did I as an individual do? Like you focus on the leader. But I'm a big believer that while the leader, in quotes, might be scarce, right? There's maybe only one CEO in an organization. Leadership, the act, is abundant. That there's so much leadership to go around and so many leadership moments to be seized that if we can stop thinking about leadership as a title and instead leadership as an act, it opens up this inclusive invitation for all of us to then become leaders, to all work together. And if we don't care who gets credit, it's amazing what we can make happen.
I want to stay here for a little bit because I agree with you. I think, wow, what did someone say of like, when there's two of us together, there's actually three brains because you're bringing one, I'm bringing another, and we're going to create something together. And I love this concept of team because it really does help us go farther, faster. But we're humans. We bring personality, we bring inner child, we bring a lot from the outside into our interactions with others. And this is in any form of a relationship, team, partnership, etc. And in the book, I know you talk about how for some teams in your class, they may encounter friction, but you also help them to bring some humility or being able to see things from another person's perspective and how that can enhance the team or enhance the interactions. So yeah, what would you like to offer to folks out there listening too about being able to be empathetic also in the way that they interact with teams, especially if they're interacting with someone who maybe has a different personality than their own, and they kind of are thinking, well, I can't get along with this person. We can never work as a team. But you offer such a powerful way to kind of reframe that and to think about your interactions with others that really help us to get over some of those personality humps and still be effective.
Yeah, such an important way to think about collaborating and teaming. And I think, honestly, K through 12 education and higher education often does a disservice because you're often graded on how well you do on an individual test or on an individual paper. But then it's like you graduate into the, quote, real world, and then all of your work is working with other people. Even if you are, let's say, a coder and you think you're hyper introverted, you just want to do your coding. Well, you still got to plug your code into the rest of the organization. So you've got to work together. So a couple of things that I like to help increase the collaboration. The first is a concept called user manuals. So imagine you go out to the store and you buy a new TV or a new toaster. It probably comes with a user manual. Whether or not you read it, I don't know. But at least it comes with it, which says like, this is how you turn it on, this is how you replace the batteries, and so on. What about if we as humans, as leaders, as individuals, what if we had our own user manuals as well? It comes from the work of Adam Bryant. And I love this. I do this often with my teams and executives that I work with. Offering them the opportunity to create their own user manuals, to give them some of the insights, give their team some of the insights that might not otherwise get picked up for months. So it might be something like, hey, just so you know, I tend to be kind of a black and white thinker. And so if I react really strongly to one of your ideas, just know that like, I probably don't mean it. Like, just give me a little time and I'll soften up a little bit. Or maybe it's saying, hey, just so you know, I just recently had a kid. And so I have to go right at 4 p.m., but I always am up very early with them anyway, so I'll check my email at 6 a.m., right? All those little things that could be points of friction, points of conflict, because you never talk about them, it's making it just out there and available. You create your user manual, you share with others on your team, and we all have some sense of everything from like, when do you work? How do you like to work? What are some of your personality quirks? How do I best communicate with you? Do you like me to text? Do you like me to email or Slack? Right? All those things, it just saves us so much time and energy, so we're on the same page from day one. The second thing I like is rethinking how we define collaboration. So when it comes to conflict, which as you mentioned, with different personalities, different goals, it's inevitable. Our teams will have conflict. And so there's something called the Thomas Kilmann instrument, which helps us understand what's our default to when there is conflict. What I really like about this is they measure how much in a negotiation or in a conflict do you look out for your own needs and how much do you look out for the needs of the other person. And so we're taught to say that, well, the best is when I don't push too hard for my ideas and the other person kind of compromises as well, and then you kind of meet halfway. That's actually where people leave kind of feeling frustrated because no one gets what they want. They only get half of what they want. What you really want is to be high on your own needs and high on the needs of the other person. When you do that, that's collaborating. And at that point, that's where new ideas come. Like you said, that's where the third brain pops up because it's not just A or B. It's saying, okay, let's use what we need from A, what we need from B, and what else might be possible as a result. And so not thinking of it as a conflict where it's zero sum win-loss, but rather I'm going to look out for myself and I'm going to look out for you. And as a result, we're going to make good things happen.
Alex, you're offering so many gems that, once again, I think for folks out there at various different levels, individual, leadership level, you can really, through reading this book, it can shift culture in a positive way, create more of that psychological safety, create more of that creative thinking, divergent thinking, just ways for us to really enhance our approaches and our perspectives. And you even talk about something, we're going to talk about the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People a little bit, but it reminds me of that win-win kind of mentality that Stephen Covey talks about. But something else in the book that you reframe so well that I found very powerful is our relationship to failure and your students' relationship to failure. And you'll have to quote me on, I don't know if they call you Professor Failure or whatever it is, but that's a part of the journey of life is failure. But so many of us fear it. And if you're going into the change-making space and trying to make a positive impact in that space, you're inevitably going to encounter it. So how do you help people to get over that notion, especially because so many of us fear failure, to embrace failure as a part of the journey? And I'd love to hear you share too, like maybe more about the activity that you actually have your students do to also learn about how to embrace failure more.
Yeah, that's right, Justin. So it's one thing to intellectually understand that we need to fail, that to lead any change, we will inevitably fail. As the Swedish business person, Mia Brunell-Livfors once told me, she said, if you're going to do anything meaningful, Alex, you are going to fail multiple times along the way. Like it's inevitable. But it's one thing to intellectually say, yeah, that's going to happen. And another to like be hit in the face with failure and to realize, okay, failure's here and I've got to keep going. So in the class, and by the way, in the book, I give some of these exercises that I actually have my students do in the UC Berkeley class, so you can try them out yourself. So in the class, we spend a couple hours talking about theories of failures, psychological research on failure, watch an inspirational talk from Denzel Washington. And then at that point, I say, okay, only one thing left to do in class. And I flash up a screen that just says, go fail. And students kind of look around at each other, like wondering what's going on? What's this guy doing? And then the next slide makes it clear. I say, okay, you have 15 minutes. You have to go leave the classroom and you have to go ask for something and get rejected. And you can't come back until you've gotten a no. And students start like nervously laughing, kind of looking at each other. And I think they're kind of hoping that I'm going to be like, just kidding. But they realize that I'm not. And so I go, okay, I'm serious. The only 2 rules are 1, you can't tell someone it's for a class until afterwards. And 2, nothing illegal or inappropriate, of course. And then I go, okay, you got 15 minutes. I'll be at the front of the classroom. If you have any questions, need a little support, but otherwise go and get them. Now I'm a big believer in the classroom that I try to create this feeling in the classroom where all students feel safe, but also just a little uncomfortable. So I spend a lot of time trying to create that feeling of psychological safety so they know that I deeply care about them as individuals. They know that it's safe to take risks, but it just pushed them a little bit beyond where they're comfortable. That's where real growth happens. So students leave the classroom and they're shuffling out nervously. But then when they come back 15 minutes later, the energy is just off the charts. So much so that I once had a professor next door come over and ask us to keep it down because these students were so energized after this failure exercise. And so what they find are 2 things. 1, that about 1/3 of students, they ask for something. They're sure they will get rejected. And they actually get a yes. The person's willing to do that crazy thing. I think about a woman who walked into the school gym and announced to everyone at the top of her lungs, she said, hi, everyone. It's not my birthday, but I would really like if you would sing happy birthday to me. Would you do that? And then she got, I don't know, a few dozen people to sing her happy birthday.
Wow.
How often do we set ourselves up for failure? Because we're sure we'll be rejected when actually we would get the thing we want in the first place. But then for the other 2/3 who do get rejected, they come back and they realize, okay, this wasn't nearly as painful as I thought it would be. No one laughed at me. I can recover from it. I can move forward. And oftentimes just that desensitization to failure when you purposely try to fail can change our mindset a little bit. And so instead of doing anything we can to never, ever fail, we go, okay, look, I've got the confidence. I know that I can get rejected. I know that I can fail. And I know I can come back stronger as a result.
Ooh. That part there of being able to fail and then realize, look around, wait, I'm still breathing, I'm still standing, I'm still able to go another day. So yeah, like just for you, like in those moments though, where you've encountered failure, were you able to tap into like that perspective, or were there other affirmations or things that just kind of helped you to get over moments of failure or things not going the way that you hoped originally?
Yeah, I mean, I teach it, but I can't say that I'm perfect with it. But what really helps me is always having like a greater why, a greater purpose, a greater mission. So like when it came to writing this book, I got a lot of rejections. There were a lot of publishers that said no to the book. But I kept going because I firmly believed in this project. I firmly believed that this book needed to come out into the world. And when it came down to it, I had plenty of offers I was really happy with, including the one, which is the magical publisher that I wanted to work with. But perhaps if I were writing a book where I really didn't care about it, didn't have as much invested, maybe it'd be a little bit harder for me to keep going past those rejections. But when I deeply cared and deeply believed in it, I was more able to see like, okay, these rejections are just a step along the way. They're inevitable. There's no way that every single publisher that I apply to will want to publish this book. It's just not possible. And so why should I take it personally? Because you never know why someone rejects you in the first place.
And with respect to that, because this is like your heart and your soul is this is in your DNA. So rejection can even hit more when maybe someone from the outside isn't supportive of your work and your vision. And you even also share some examples from your own career journey of rejection. And I know there's folks out there who maybe are looking to, part of their change-making experience is wanting to pivot into a different career path outside of the one that they're currently in. So like, I guess, yeah, what would you offer to them if in that road to the pivot, applying for the job opportunity, they encounter those rejection letters or they're not getting the interviews, but they're really fixated on this greater why that they want to, once again, create a positive impact in? What would you offer to them of like, to kind of hold on as you've shared in your own personal experience?
Yeah, we love to tell ourselves stories when we get rejected and that we're sure we know exactly why we got rejected, because that one jerk or because I messed up in that interview. I should have done something differently. But the truth is we never know why we get rejected. And here's the real truth is I'm really lucky to be at Berkeley. I actually got rejected for my first job there. I ended up in second place, got a very nice rejection letter, which said, hey, Alex, sorry, we decided to offer the job to someone else. You finished in second place out of a lot of candidates. You should feel really proud about yourself. But yeah, anyway, we offered the job to someone else. Keep in touch. And, that's a really deflating moment because I really wanted the job. But I, was nice about it. Said, thank you. Let's keep in touch. Let me know how I can support you in the future. And then 3 days later, I got an email with a subject line that was very dramatic. It just said, development, ... And I opened up the email and it said, hey, Alex, remember how we said that we offered the job to someone else? Well, we did, but they couldn't take it. So since you were in second place, you get the job. Do you want it? And of course, yes, I do. But also that reminded me that you never know why you get rejected from something. Why was it that this other person got the job and I didn't? Who knows? But just because I was in second place didn't make it any less meaningful that I could do a good job or could do good work in the job. Like, there's so much serendipity, there's so much luck. And sometimes it's just a matter of putting yourself out there enough times that good luck finds you.
Yeah. And it all worked itself out. And like, even the redirection, while you didn't get that first opportunity, what it redirected you to, you just never know. So it's just like, yeah, keep trying, keep hanging in there. And once again, you will eventually break through, folks. So I just want you to understand that as you're hearing from Alex's story and just so much of what he shares to help us reframe our relationship to failure in the book. Something else I want to hit on is change and change making. But change is that one constant in our world that we could always count on, but we know that it doesn't happen overnight. So especially in this space where people want to make a positive impact, but it could take time, years, months, years, etc. So for folks out there who are struggling to remain hopeful, to remain patient with the process as they're looking to make change, but it isn't happening as fast as they want, is there any thoughts that you could share from your own experience or the experiences that you've learned from others about the marathon, but folks really hoping that it's more of a sprint?
That's such a good question. It's something I see all the time in my students and in changemakers that I work with. I think back to, I had one of my very favorite changemakers, Sid Espinoza, come talk to my class as a guest speaker. Sid is the first ever Latino mayor of Palo Alto, California. And at the time, he was head of philanthropy at Microsoft. And so a student asked him almost exactly that same question, Justin. It was like, hey, there's a lot of change I want to make, but it seems like I can never make it all. And it feels really overwhelming. What should we do? And so when Sid gave this answer, at first, me being the professor in the back of the room, I was like, uh-oh, did he just like dash these students' hopes? Like, did he just like make them feel badly? But no, it turned out this is one of the greatest pieces of advice that anyone's ever given in my class. And it so deeply resonated with my students. He said, you've got to start thinking about change as if it's a relay race. In other words, what you got to do is pick up the baton from those who've come before you, whatever that change is that you want to see in the world. You have to pick up that baton, build upon where people got you. And then your job is simply to advance the baton as much as you can during the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years that you're working on it. But it's not just that. Once you're ready to hand off the baton again, be a good steward of the change. Hand it off to someone so that they are ready to go sprint forward and continue your work forward. That means being a good mentor, being a good supporter, making it clear and helpful for others to then follow you. And so if we stop thinking about it as an individual race or even a marathon, and instead thinking about a relay race, that's where you can actually see that, okay, I've got a role to play here. And maybe I won't solve this all in my lifetime, but I'm going to move us forward and I'm going to do it with others.
This is incredible. And once again, these stories that you share, Alex, and how they connect, and these metaphors too, of looking at things of, okay, with our time here, we're just going to leave things in a better place, but then with it, we pass it on. It's just so important, so mindful. And I know we don't live in the most collective society, but this is an opportunity right now for us to become more conscious about becoming more collective in our work. And once again, how it could be just a driver for creating a stronger impact across the board, especially for those coming after us. So before we wrap up, we hit on a little bit of talking about self-care and personal care. And you talked about this in the book, because this change-making thing with it being your heart and your soul, it could take a lot of energy. And some of us can become so passionate about it where we feel guilty about taking a step back or giving ourselves a breather. So anything that you would share to folks out there who, when it comes to self-care, personal care, about not becoming too focused or busy, not creating time for themselves to fill up their own cup and not thinking that they're letting anyone down in the process of doing so?
Yeah, the first is that self-care is not selfish. Sometimes it's a means of preserving ourselves and our ability to lead change. So that's the first thing. But then beyond there, I would start saying, you need to, or I think we as a collective, as a community, as a society, we need to start redefining what we mean by resilience or grit. We tend to just glorify people who just keep going, keep going, keep going. And I think we tend to think that resilience is something like enduring as much pain as possible, like just going and going and going. But instead, I like defining resilience as staying strong for the long haul. If we're playing the long game, it's fine to take a weekend off. It's fine to take a month off, 2 months off. You got to make sure that you're recharging so that way you can give your fullest contributions. It's not just about getting hit over and over and over and just going forward without thinking about it. It's making sure you preserve yourself, which is the most important resource that you have. And so can you remain strong for the long haul, take that long-term view towards change?
I love that playing the long game and looking at life, looking at what we're doing with that perspective. Because if that's the case, then yeah, you taking the weekend off, it really isn't that big of a deal in the grand scope of things. And then also, Alex, thank you for continuing to just emphasize that we need to do this as a collective. It's the responsibility for all of us to rewrite these narratives that are out there, to rewrite this culture. And many of those who are in, once again, those titled positions have the opportunity to do so, and kind of enabling more of us to feel better about taking time out for ourselves, resharpening our saw, as Stephen Covey shares. And hopefully books like yours, messages like yours continue to help us to make that turn as a culture, especially in the working world. So what I want to jump into now, Alex, is our Each One Teach One rapid fire questions. I've got 4 questions for you, and you just share what comes to the surface to your spirit. Are you ready for it?
Yeah, let's do it, Justin.
All right, Alex. So the first question is, what is one book that you would recommend to folks that has been a game changer for you?
I love the book Life Entrepreneurs by Greg Vanerick and Christopher Gergen. It's all about how you can take the tools of entrepreneurship, but apply it not to a business, but apply it to your own life. It's been really eye-opening for me in my own journey as a life entrepreneur.
All right. Thank you for sharing that one. So our next one is, what is one habit or practice that has been impactful in your lifestyle design?
Oh, I mean, it's got to be exercise. Like when you think about the different ways you sharpen the saw, whenever I'm feeling stressed or feeling overwhelmed, taking time off to just exercise makes me feel so much better and so much sharper on every other dimension. So regular exercise practice.
All right. And anything you share about that? Are you like weights? Are you yoga, like Pilates, hiking? What's your go-tos?
At the beginning of COVID, I decided, okay, well, gyms are closed. I'm going to go be a runner. That did not last very long. So I would say most things besides running would probably be what I like, but kind of high intensity interval training seems to be my favorite.
Good stuff. Good stuff, Alex. All right. So we're going to put you in the policy seat here. So if there was one law or policy that you create that everyone would have to abide by, what would it be?
I would love to see a national year of service. So agnostic on how people serve. So it could be in the US context, Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, military service, maybe it's early childhood education, maybe something else. But I'm a big believer in right after high school that everyone should serve in some way, serve your community, get to know people. I think it'd be so healthy for us as individuals and also really healthy for us as a country.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Love that in terms of giving back. And then the last question, Alex, that I'm asking for everyone this season is, when you think about who you've become today, what is the biggest limiting belief about yourself that you needed to let go of?
I think this connects from my teaching to my now writing this book, but I think it's a limiting belief that I don't have anything to say to the world or that I don't have new ideas to put forward. And I think that's the limiting belief I had to get over to stand up in front of a classroom and teach and to get out there and write a book as well. So yeah, that's the one.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that's something that many folks out there resonate with. And once again, you're showing that we all have something to offer to the world, and we just need to let it come to the surface. So as we wrap things up here, Alex, I would love for you to share just like what's next for you and where can people go to find out more about the book and learn more about you?
Thanks. I love hearing from Changemakers. So please feel free to reach out. You can go to changemakerbook.com to check out more about the book. Find me on LinkedIn at Alex Budak. That's where I'm probably most active. And also I've got a TikTok channel going where I share lessons and ideas from the book as well. So that's at Alex Budak on TikTok. But yeah, please reach out. I love hearing from Changemakers, what's resonating with you and sharing a bit of your Changemaker journey with me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Alex, I want to thank you again for your time. Also the opportunity to read the book. Like I said, it just inspired me and it made me so just excited. And I know folks that listen today, from everything you shared about how we can change the status quo, developing the changemaker mindset, the talk that we had about self-care, and also just connection with others, the importance of community, collaboration with others. I just think there's so many impactful stories and strategies and science that you have in the book that it's really just going to be great for folks to get to take advantage of this, and they're just going to be inspired to do so much great work. So just thank you for sharing that and sharing your light with the world here and your time with us today.
Thanks, Justin. What a fun, wide-ranging conversation. I really, really enjoyed it, and I appreciate you having me.
Yes, thank you. So, folks, that is it for today's show. I'd like to thank you again for your presence and tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please show your support by sharing the Living Once Twice podcast on Instagram, LinkedIn, or wherever, and leaving us a review on iTunes. Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Living Once Twice, reaching out to you all through the time and the space that separates us to say, remember, your dream life is waiting for you. It's time to go for it. You deserve it. Catch you later on Living Once Twice.